I just spent a month in Antalya, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the things you can do if you're visiting Antalya or staying for a longer time, and some of the foods you should definitely try if you're there, as well as some day trips in the area that are worth seeing. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what to do if you're just a tourist coming for a couple of days only versus a few extra things that if you're staying a little longer or slow traveling, you may want to check out as well. This is the second video in a three-part series where I talk about slow travel in a specific destination, and today we're talking about Antalya. My first video went over how to get here, how to get around, and also talked a little bit about the costs you may expect to see if you're visiting. And my last video after this will also talk about how much exactly I did spend while I was in Antalya, as well as whether or not I could see myself staying in Antalya for a longer period of time. If you haven't already seen the first one, you can do that here. Otherwise, my next one will be coming out next week. My name is Kyria, and I've traveled to almost 60 countries, and last year I retired early to travel the world full-time. I know when I'm looking for a location to visit, I like to do a lot of research, so hopefully this will help you. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. The first disclaimer I want to make is that I will probably pronounce some of these things wrong. I'm going to do my best, but just bear with me. Some of the words are a little hard to say, and also I will be calling the country name Türkiye. When I can, I may slip up and say Turkey because that is what it was always called. And so I just want to apologize in advance in case I mess anything up, because I probably will. So let's get started. Just to give you a quick lay of the land, in Antalya, the main part of town is the old part of town, which is called the Kaleici neighborhood. And around that, you also have the Bazaar areas, as well as an area on the cliffs where there are restaurants and nightclubs and things like that. There's also the surrounding area, which has a lot of restaurants and shops and whatnot. And a lot of the main tourist accommodation is in this area. However, there are two main beaches that are kind of closer by the Old Town area. And that is Konyaalti Beach, which is to the west, and Lara Beach, which is to the east. A lot of people stay somewhere in between the Old Town and one of the beaches, or sometimes even closer to the beaches. And just as a tip for you, I stayed near the Old Town, which was nice, but I think now, knowing what I know, I would have rather stayed closer to Konyaalti Beach, where there's a lot of running paths, cycling paths, and things like that that are easier to get to. And then I would have gone down to the Old Town and that area if I wanted to, instead of doing it the opposite way. Like I said, I'm going to start off with some of the more touristy things, so if you have a limited amount of time, you may want to start with these. First one is Hadrian's Gate. Hadrian's Gate was built in the year 130 to honor the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who was coming to visit the town of Antalya. The gate itself is the entrance to the Old Town, so like I said, that's the Kaleici neighborhood, and it actually is in very good shape for being so old. I think the reason for this, according to what I've read, is that apparently it was covered with dirt, and so that preserved it a little bit more than if it had just stood out in the elements. But you can see a kind of line where maybe the dirt line was, so the things above the dirt line are a different color than the things below the dirt line. But it has really intricate details and is really a sight to behold. And if you walk through Hadrian's Gate, you're going to come into the Old Town, which is the Kaleici neighborhood. This neighborhood has some interesting things, including Ottoman-era houses, Roman ruins, ancient city walls, and some cemeteries, as well as one museum that goes over a lot of the Turkish culture and is actually free to get into, and is worth just poking your head in and looking around. This area also has a lot of shops, restaurants, and other things to see. And if you notice, there'll be glass on the ground, and if you look down into the glass, you'll see another layer of rock, which is the original road in the town, which is pretty cool. Also, you'll see the streets are quite narrow. However, the merchants used to have their shop on the ground floor and their lodging on the next floor up. And when they wanted to socialize, they would go out into the streets and socialize and have tea and whatnot. But if they wanted to be by themselves, they would go into the backyard and they would sit in their courtyard in the backyard, which a lot of them had, with orange trees or lemon trees, pomegranate trees, and gardens and things like that. So they could kind of go and socialize in the front and be kind of secluded in the back if they wanted to. So that's kind of, if you look at the buildings, you'll see that they're all flat on the front, but then there's a lot of space in the back, and you can kind of sometimes not quite peek over the walls, but you can see the trees over the walls, so that's kind of fun. There's a ton of fruit and stuff in Old Town as well as all over the country. I'm here in spring and the orange blossoms are blooming and they are just so nice and fragrant, and it is just really nice to just walk around and look at all the greenery and smell the nice scents. In addition, a lot of the hotels now also have an inner courtyard, and it's perfectly fine for you to go in and wander around a little bit. A lot of times they'll have a restaurant associated with it, so they won't like bother you if you go in and want to look at it. But they have some really intricately tiled floors and pools and water features and things like that. So it's really fun to just kind of wander around and poke your head in some of the open doorways and check things out. The next thing is Konyaalti Beach, which, like I said, I would have preferred to be down there, but it is a little touristy as well. However, I am here in the spring, and so it's the off season, so it's not super busy yet. And it's just nice to be able to walk along the promenade, run. There's people cycling. There's people doing all kinds of sports, paddleboarding and paragliding and boating, kayaking, whatnot. So it's a very active place, and also like lots of little families picnicking and just enjoying the nice days. But if you want to, you can also go to coffee shops and restaurants and bars along the beach. The really nice thing about it, and my favorite part, is if you look down the beach, you can see the mountains in the distance, and it's just a really beautiful setting. Going back towards the Old Town area again, you'll find the Bazaar or Market District, which is chock full of things like clothing, wares, rugs, of course, food, restaurants, just all kinds of little shops. So if you love shopping, you'll love the Bazaar. And even if you don't love shopping, it is kind of fun to just kind of take a couple passes through. And sometimes you'll be doing that anyway because you're going from one place to another. So it's worth going in through the Bazaar rather than around on the other street at least a couple of times. The other thing which you can do is you can try the local food. And like I said, I'm going to go over some of that in a minute. But the really fun thing is the ice cream sellers. And they will put on like a whole show, and they'll kind of tease you with the ice cream, like they're going to give it to you and then they don't. And so it's kind of fun just to sit in the square and watch them when people are buying ice cream. You can also visit the Antalya Museum, which houses a lot of artifacts from various different time periods, as well as many artifacts from the ancient civilizations in the area. As I mentioned, one of the other things between the Konyaalti Beach and the Old Town area is a whole walkway with a bunch of restaurants along the cliffs and nightclubs. So if you're into staying up all night dancing, you'll definitely be able to do that. Or if you just want to go and enjoy a coffee and look out into the water, you can do that too. And if you don't really feel like spending a lot of money, you can just walk along that area. And there's a park called Ataturk Park, which instead of walking on the street, you go down into Ataturk Park and you'll kind of be along the cliffs, and you can peek over the cliffs, look at the people dining on the cliffs, pet the cats because there's always cats, and look at the water, which is just very, very blue, which is why this area of Türkiye is called the Turquoise Coast. Now, all those places can be a little bit busy and sometimes a little more expensive. So one tip I have if you're staying a little longer, or even if you're not, is to get out of those main areas and just go off the beaten path a little. And you don't have to go very far to go off the beaten path per se. So there's a lot of malls in the area, and this is probably really great when it's really hot out because they're air conditioned. But one of them is Mark Antalya, which is very close to the main Old Town area. And you can go in there and you can get food, coffee, and all kinds of other things. You can go shopping, and it's a little bit cheaper than the touristy area. So there's an option there. Or if you really want to try a more local vibe, then just keep going away from the beach or away from the water, and you'll find local shops serving all kinds of different local foods, and you'll be able to get things for a fraction of the cost. If you want to, you can look at my previous video where I talked a little bit about how much things cost in the restaurants, and I separated them out into the Kaleici neighborhood, the Konyaalti neighborhood, and then the more local neighborhoods. So you can kind of see exactly how much difference the prices are depending on where you are. In addition to that, one of my favorite things to do is go to the local markets. And these are usually once a week in different neighborhoods. So each neighborhood has its own day of the week that it has a market. For me, this was Friday, and I really just enjoyed wandering around these markets and buying all my vegetables and fruit there, as well as just kind of seeing what else there was to offer. So these markets have food, so there's vegetables, fruit, nuts, eggs, cheeses, olives, all kinds of things. And they're really fresh, and you can taste pretty much any of them. The nuts are freshly roasted, and you can see the guy roast them right in front of you. And they're not even that expensive. The olives, there's probably, dozens of different kinds, and you're allowed to try them. In fact, I see a lot of people just walking past and picking them up and trying them. So it's worth testing some of them and seeing if you like them. Also, cheeses, you can buy them by the 100 grams or kilo if you want. But you can also test those or taste those before you take them home. And then my favorite thing, of course, is the fresh vegetables. They are just super affordable and super fresh. And, you know, even though a lot of the guys don't speak any English, all you really need to know how to say is 1 kilo or half a kilo, which is beer kilo or yarım kilo. And then you just point out what you want, and you can go home with the nicest, freshest, beautiful vegetables that you've ever seen. So a lot of the vegetables are grown nearby, so they really are just picking them and bringing them straight to the market, which is just excellent. You can also get meat, fish, and clothing, shoes, and other goods. So it's worth wandering around and just checking things out. Okay, let's talk about some day trips. There are many, many different excursions you can do, and there's always sites like Get Your Guide or Viator. And then there's people on the street everywhere. So if you're looking to do something, you'll have no issues price comparing, price shopping, and or just buying them online. One of the things I did and really enjoyed was the trip to Pamukkale and Hierapolis. This is a combined trip. So Pamukkale is basically a bunch of layered white travertine terraces with water in them, and the water is hot, but as the water moves down from terrace to terrace, it gets cooler. So at the very top, it's hotter than at the very bottom. Apparently, you can go swimming in them. They seemed a little shallow to me and not as hot as I had thought they were going to be, so I did not swim. But they're really a sight to behold, even if you don't actually go in and dip in them. And then on the same grounds is the ruins of Hierapolis, which has a whole like acropolis, necropolis, lavatories, and a stunning, stunning theater. So the theater itself, I saved that for last, and I'm really glad I did save the best for last, you know. And it was just really, really nice to walk around the grounds, and the theater is in excellent, excellent condition, and it's just beautiful. So I think it's well worth the time and the money. It's a whole day excursion from Antalya, and the drive is about 3 hours each way. I used Get Your Guide. I paid about $40 for the tour, and then you have to pay separately to get into the entrance. So that was another 30 euros, which currently is about $33. So altogether, it was about $73. So a little bit steep, but you can shop around, and you just want to make sure you ask if the entrance fee is included or not, because some of them do include it and some of them don't include it. And so you'll see like a big difference in the pricing sometimes, but that's probably why. But you just want to verify that it is included if the price is a little more expensive. The other one I really liked, and this is right up my alley because it basically is ruins, beaches, and hiking all in one go, and it's Phaselis. So this is about an hour drive away from Antalya. And you can do it as a tour if you want, or you can take a cab if you have a few people. It's probably a better deal to do that. Or you could try the local transportation, which is the dolmuş, which is a minivan, and see how you go with that. But either way, it's worth it. Basically, you'll get dropped off right near the ruins, and then you can look at the ruins, and you can go to the beach afterward, and you can also do a little hiking if you feel like doing that as well, but you don't have to. So that's a very convenient, easy one to go and see, and also you could go to the beach at the same time. There's several different beaches too. There's little tiny ones with rocks. There's a big huge one with sand. Whatever kind of beach you like, you're going to find it. So the little tiny one with rocks is kind of secluded and nice, and not a lot of people are there, so that's kind of fun. And the water is just beautiful. There are also a couple other ruins that you can get to from Antalya, either on the bus or on the tram. One of them is Sea Day. That one is a bus ride. And the other one is a name I'm going to butcher, but I think it's Perge. Anyway, that one is something you can actually get to on the tram. So both of those cost about 15 euro. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's about 15 euro to get into. So just take that into consideration if you're considering doing a tour. Also, if you're into hiking, there is a ton of hiking near Antalya. There are huge mountains to the north and the west, and there are accessible areas. If you are willing to take a dolmuş, like I said, the little minivan, you can get to many different little towns where you can start hiking from. So some of the options, like I said, Phaselis is one of them. You can go to Kemer, you can go to Kaş or Çırağlı, or if you want to go north, I didn't really do that, but there are other options there. The other thing you can do if you rent a car, that's a great opportunity to go to some of the little lesser known ones, but it's fairly easy to get around even to the smaller towns. So you can always take public transportation. It just takes a little longer. Like I said, there are a ton of different excursions you can do depending on what you're into. So I didn't do any of these, but there are ATV rides, there's paddleboarding, there are boat trips where you can go and do an island tour. There's boat trips where you can actually get dropped off and cycle a little way and then get picked back up and cycle a little way after. There are so many different excursions and tours you can do. So really depending on what you'd like to do, there's going to be something that's going to float your boat. All right, let's talk about one of my favorite things, the food. There is so much good food in Türkiye. And like I said, the vegetables in the market are so fresh, and you really could just live off of fresh vegetables and cheese. I mean, I don't know. But there are also really good meats and everything. And just as a side note, if you're a vegetarian, you should not have any problem in Türkiye whatsoever. So there are a ton of options for no meat. The only thing is, if you're a vegan, just be aware that a lot of the dips and things like that have yogurt. So yogurt is a pretty big staple. And if you're gluten-free, you should be able to get quite a few things gluten-free as well. But also, again, just be aware that some of the dips that I would not normally think would have any kind of gluten in them, for instance, hummus, which is just chickpeas, lemon, tahini, olive oil, salt. When we went to a place for mezes, which are appetizers, which I'll talk about in a minute, you would think that that wouldn't have gluten, but the server told us that that did have gluten. So I'm not sure why it had gluten, but just be aware and make sure you ask, because not everything you think is gluten-free will be gluten-free. So I could do an entire video about all the foods that are good, but I'm just gonna stick to a short list, so I'm not gonna cover them all. But I'd love your input. If there's something on this list that I didn't say that you think is really great, just leave them in the comments below, because I'm sure everyone would love to hear any other suggestions. The first one is döner. You probably are familiar with this, but it's the rotisserie style meat that they take the big knife and they cut the pieces off and slice nice and thin chunks, and usually put these on a pita. But also you can get them as a just meat with rice sometimes, or just meat with vegetables, etc. So it comes in multiple different ways. And this can be chicken or meat, so it just really depends. The next one, which is one of my favorites, is Iskender. I'm going to pronounce all these with a French accent, maybe. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is thinly sliced döner meat, and it's served over a pita, and then they put tomato sauce on it, and then melted butter, can't go wrong with that, and with a side of yogurt. So you have kind of the acidity of the yogurt and the acidity of the tomatoes, and then the meat, the like heaviness of the meat, and I just love it. I just love it. It's really good flavors, and I mean the butter. Who was it that said you can't go wrong with butter? It's like butter. The next one is a pide, which is like a boat-shaped flatbread that it sometimes has cheese or meat in it, or vegetables. So you can get this vegetarian as well. And they usually cut it in little slices, and you can share it if you want, or as I like to do, I just eat the whole thing by myself. This is often called Turkish pizza, but then the next one, I think it might be also called Turkish pizza, so it could be confusing. But the next one is called, and this one I'm really gonna butcher, lahmacun. I'll put the name up on the screen so you can see how it's spelled. But basically, this looks like a pizza, what you would think of. It's round, and it's a little bit thinner bread than the pita, and it's topped with spiced meat and herbs. Speaking of spiced meat and herbs, one of my favorite things to get is the kofta, which is a meatball kind of thing, which is made out of spiced minced meat and herbs, and is often served with rice. But you can also get it on a sandwich, which is nice. The next is manti, which basically is like a little Turkish dumpling, but you may see it on the menu as Turkish ravioli or just ravioli, because I think that a lot of tourists probably were like, what the heck is manti? And so the Turkish people just decided to call it ravioli so that we would kind of understand what it is. But it's manti, and it's usually filled with meat or sometimes cheese, and then topped with usually some sort of tomato sauce and yogurt. Another one of my favorites is the Turkish breakfast. So if you get a hotel instead of an Airbnb, definitely try to get one with breakfast, because it's really fun to experience the Turkish breakfast. If you get an Airbnb, make sure you go out for Turkish breakfast. Maybe even if you are not a breakfast person, don't worry about it, because the Turkish breakfast is served rather late, in my opinion. I mean, it's not a 7 o'clock thing, it's more of a 10 o'clock thing. So even if you want to have a little bit of a later meal, you can still have it. And it is delicious. It is basically a bunch of different things. And most of the time, the staples are cheese, bread, tomatoes, cucumbers, fresh fruit jam, honey, butter, olives, and hard-boiled eggs, usually. But sometimes you'll get little pastries or fried tubes of cheese. I mean, it really varies a lot, but the staples are the things I just said. But otherwise, I mean, it's a spread. You get a lot of stuff and it's delicious. So it's really fun if you have a hotel that's serving breakfast, especially if it's a buffet, because you get to try everything. But just make sure you try the cheese with the honey and the bread. That's the combo. The white cheese with the honey and the bread. You'll thank me for it if you try it. You're gonna love it. Then of course there's Turkish coffee and Turkish tea, which Turkish coffee is called kahvesi and Turkish tea is called chai. If you try the Turkish coffee, just make sure you don't drink the bottom, because the way it's cooked is it's cooked in a pan with the grounds, so there's no filter. So they just boil the grounds with the water in a pan, and then you pour it into a tiny cup. And you don't drink the whole cup, just drink like 3/4 of the top. And it's a tiny little cup, but it's delicious. Unless you get a mouthful of grounds, then it's a little off-putting. They also tell their fortunes in the coffee. So it's kind of fun to see what your fortune is if you know how to do that, or if someone will do it for you. The Turkish tea, you'll see it. It's on like a double boiler system kind of thing in a pot, and it's served in a little tulip-shaped cup. And generally, it's not like English tea. You don't put milk in it. It's just usually plain tea or plain tea with sugar. And you'll see people drinking tea all day long. The next one is the meze plate, which I talked about before, but basically this is just a bunch of different appetizers, and oftentimes you'll get bread with it or pita, and you can dip the bread in the appetizers. Now, they're not all dips necessarily. Sometimes it's vegetables of some sort, pickled vegetables, or things like baba ganoush made out of eggplant. Sometimes it's beans, sometimes it's yogurt. There's a lot of different things, but it's worth trying one with, 8 or 10 different things, because then you get to try all the things at the same time, which is always fun. Like I said, a lot of these do have yogurt in them, so if you're vegan, just watch out for that. And a lot of them, for some reason, do have gluten in them, so just need to ask about that as well. Oftentimes, these items are all cold. Sometimes you can get them hot as well, but often they're not hot. Another very Turkish thing to drink is ayran. This is I would consider it very similar to kefir. So if you've had kefir and you like kefir, you'll probably like it. It's basically yogurt and water and salt mixed together, and it's thin. So it's not like the thickness of kefir, but it has that same kind of little bit of plain yogurt taste like kefir does. And some people call it Turkish buttermilk, but it isn't actually buttermilk. It is yogurt, water, and salt. So if you like plain yogurt, you should try it. If you don't like plain yogurt, you should try it anyway, but if you don't like that tang of the plain yogurt, it might not be right up your alley. I really like it, especially on a hot day, which seems kind of weird to drink a milky drink on a hot day, but it's really great if you're having a hike or something like that and you just need something kind of cold but with calories. It really does hit the spot, so I really like it. Like I said, the Turkish breakfast has a lot of different cheeses, and I suggest that you try them all, because sometimes there'll be like 4 or 5, 6 different cheeses for breakfast. But one of my favorites, and this is especially great if you have a place to cook, is hellim. So if you've ever had Greek halloumi, hellim is just the Turkish version of that. So it's kind of a squeaky, salty cheese, and it's best when fried. So if you have an Airbnb or a kitchen, if you just fry it up in a little bit of oil and then eat it plain, I mean, plain is fine, or with tomatoes, or however you like it. Personally, I just eat it plain. I love it. It's so good. And it's something that at home would cost like $10, and you can get it in the grocery store here for like $2. So it's worth having it if you like it. And last but not least, I left this for last because, dessert. Of course, there's baklava. We've all probably tried that. But Turkish delight is one of the things that you definitely have to try if you're here. Now, don't be afraid, because Turkish delight is similar to saying candy. So it's not all the same. They call it lokum, but basically you have many, many different kinds. So just because you've had one Turkish delight does not mean that you've had all Turkish delights and that you won't like the other ones. Some of them are made out of, they're in little square gummies. So those are one main one. But there's also ones that have halva in them, which is kind of a sesame seed tahini paste, like a sweetened one. And some of them look like little rolls, like a snail. And those sometimes are gummy. They sometimes have nuts. They sometimes have chocolate. They sometimes have coconut. They sometimes have the halva. So there's a lot of different kinds. So if you go into a Turkish delight store, they'll let you sample all of them. So you definitely should. So now I've talked about some things to do in Antalya, around Antalya, and some things to try to eat. So now your turn. You tell me, what are your favorite things to do in Türkiye or Antalya, and what is your favorite Turkish food? Thank you very much for watching, and happy travels.